All right, joining us now from Washington is a guy, a very smart guy, Dr. Hal Brands. He's got a new book out. I have it, I'm perusing it. The Eurasian Century, Hot Wars, Cold Wars, and the Making of the Modern World. It's out in January. He is a distinguished professor of global affairs at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. It's a lot to get on a business card there, doctor, a lot of that stuff on one little card. So, but anyway, you know what you're talking about. What I'm interested in is the change and the danger rise. So we got with Russia and China allying to hurt the West over Ukraine. That's a pretty, everybody knows the situation, but that's very intense, right?
It's probably the most dangerous situation we've faced as a country since the early Cold War, because it's Russia and China that are working together. China's been a major supporter of Russia's war in Ukraine, but it's also Iran and North Korea. Iran has provided a lot of the drones, and North Korea's even provided some of the manpower that Putin has used in this brutal assault on Ukraine. And so it's a situation where you have four of the bad guys working together at the heart of Eurasia to try to shape the wider world.
But they're not trying to shape it in any good way, right? They're totalitarians.
No, that's right. That's right. These are all deeply autocratic, deeply undemocratic regimes. They all want to carve out big spheres of influence, which they would probably rule in a pretty brutal fashion. They want to bring about a world that is totally different than the one that Americans have known and have done so well in over the past.
Yeah, well, there's no place for freedom or free enterprise at all. Reminds me of the late 1930s when you had the Axis powers, Hitler, Mussolini, and some others joining together to try to impose fascism on the world. And then you had Japan, which was a fascist state as well, in the Pacific. Is there any difference?
I think there's some pretty strong parallels. Back then, the problem was that you had a handful of separate aggressive countries that were all sort of doing their own thing in their particular regions, but the combined effect of that was to destabilize the wider world. And of course, eventually the United States got dragged into the conflicts that resulted. Today, you have a similar phenomenon where Russia and China and Iran and North Korea, they all want their own things. They all have their own agendas, but they're all putting pressure on the international system that America and its friends built at the same time. And if anything, they're cooperating more closely than the Axis powers did in the late 30s and early 40s.
Yeah. Now, from your vantage point, is there anything that President Trump should be doing or should not be doing? If you were to have dinner with him tonight, would you have any suggestions for him?
I think he's on the right track in terms of putting a lot of pressure on Iran. I think Iran is the weakest member of this autocratic axis, and it is the one that has been most softened up over the past year, mostly by Israel, for the imposition of this pressure. And so he's got a good chance to really squeeze the Iranians and maybe get a stronger nuclear deal than the U.S. got back in 2015 under the Obama administration. The thing I would tell him not to do is not to think that he's going to be successful in prying Russia and China apart. You've sometimes heard this, not so much from Trump, but from people around him, that if the war in Ukraine ends, maybe the United States can enlist Russia to help contain China. I just don't think that's how it works. I think
let me challenge you.
Close.
Let me challenge you on that, okay? So we got Johns Hopkins, you. We got Harvard, me. All right? It's kind of like a little game show here. If Trump makes the Ukraine deal, part of that deal has to be that Putin gets back in G7. He gets back into the Western economies where he can sell his oil. That's primarily what he's got, okay? China, then, Putin doesn't need China as much as he needs it now. So what Trump is trying to do is lure him back into the European sector and then de-emphasize, because as you know, historically, the Russians and the Chinese hate each other. I don't know if that's gone away, but I don't think they're buddies. And China's power dwarfs Putin's power. Putin can't be happy about that. Putin needs money. He needs commerce. So that's what Trump is thinking. Where's he going wrong?
I think the theory of the case is exactly as you described it. I think the challenge is sort of twofold. One is, how much do you have to give Putin to get him to put some daylight between him and China? And I worry that the answer might be quite a lot. And the second point is that, Putin knows that if he cuts a deal with Trump, there's no guarantee that deal is going to last beyond January 20th, 2029. And so he will welcome, reduce sanctions, greater economic engagement from with the West, because I'm sure he's not entirely comfortable with the degree of dependence he's developed on China, but he's not going to push China to the side of the road, because that's a long.
I don't think he's going to push it, but China can't do him too much good economically other than buying his oil. But anyway, that's Trump's mindset. And I think the deal is going to have to come down, whereas Ukraine will lose 10% of its territory, but there'll be, bogus elections. That's what they'll throw. And then EU will provide peacekeepers. USA will make the mineral deal, and that puts a structure for the USA inside Ukraine. And then Putin will be allowed back into the G7, and he'll go to all the meetings and all. That's what I think is going to happen. You got anything else that you think might pop in there?
I would just say I still think the critical element is whether there's going to be a U.S. Backstop for the European security.
That would be the mineral deal.
I think that's part of it. Yeah. I would just say I think that the Europeans know that they're going to be in trouble if they get attacked by the Russians, if the U.S. isn't there to help. And so they don't need the U.S. there holding their hand every day. They just need a promise that the U.S. will be there in extremis if things really.
No, but they'll up their spending. They're not suicidal over there. They're greedy, the Europeans. And interestingly enough, you look at the ambassadorships, you ought to have your students do this, who Trump has appointed in all of the European capitals. These are tough guys. Yeah. So,
and I think the Europeans have gotten the message on defense.
Oh yeah,
that's great. It's just going to take them a few years to get to the point where they're a little bit more self-reliant.
Now, Americans, by and large, don't understand much of this. I'm not being supercilious, word of the day, but they just don't know. They don't know what tariffs are, which is why I took the time to explain it. They don't know the dynamic. They just want to live their lives. They don't want to get involved with geopolitics. They don't understand the dynamic that is taking place and the huge changes in the world. This is a deficit for America that they don't understand, right?
Yeah, I think it's also a testament to the success of what the U.S. has tried to do over the past 80 years. We've been successful in preventing other global wars from breaking out, Great Depressions from breaking out. And so it's become a little bit easier to forget what all this is meant to achieve. My grandfather, he was a navigator in B-24s and B-25s in Europe during World War II. And so nobody had to explain to him why American global engagement mattered. And I think we've lost a little bit of that over the years.
Well, we have lost it. Now we're in a deep age of narcissism and apathy. But here's the kicker on this. Got a lot of left-wingers in the press screaming that Trump isn't pounding Putin as a fascist dog. If you look at Yalta, what Roosevelt did with Stalin, I mean, he kissed him up and down, in and out, every way. And he had to know, because Churchill knew, that Stalin was going to break every treaty in the world, and which he did, and come right across and try to dominate Europe, which he did. But Roosevelt said, look, I got to stop this world war. I got to stop it. It's very, very akin to what Trump is doing. Last word.
I think there are definitely some parallels. I think Trump thinks we just need to get sort of the moralizing out of U.S. foreign policy and focus on hard power realities. There's something to be said for that. But I would just also point out that one of the great things about America is that we do stand up for principle in the world. And so I just hope we won't correct too far on it.
Trump doesn't see it that way. He's not one of those guys. He's a businessman, cold-blooded businessman. So you're right. The theory about, here comes America to liberate everybody, it's not this president. He's looking out for Americans. He wants peace. He doesn't want war. He's not a warmonger at all. Okay, but he's not looking at it like we have a responsibility to the rest of the world to keep them safe. Would you say that was accurate?
I think that's a very accurate description of how Trump sees the world.
All right, Professor, we really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on X. Look for @Bill O'Reilly.